Hey, what's up? It's Jim, and today I'm going to talk about Orion and the Dark. This is the latest film from Dreamworks, but I think what is most surprising about this is actually written by Charlie Kaufman, which I think was honestly the main draw for me to see this because, I'll probably see any Dreamworks movie, but the idea that they would make kind of a kids film written by Charlie Kaufman in any degree sounded kind of interesting and fascinating and surprising. And this very much feels like a Charlie Kaufman, sort of the most studio kind of Charlie Kaufman film you can imagine, because he feels like such a unique voice, or he is a unique voice. And this doesn't feel like necessarily not him. It feels like him all throughout it, but it feels like him filtered kind of through sort of the Dreamworks big animation machine, but in best way you can imagine that. It's definitely probably one of the more interesting screenplays you can think of of a kids animated film. One that I'm I guess I'm not super surprised because I know Charlie Kaufman stuff. I think I've seen them all. But I liked its willingness to play with things that would matter to kids and being in a kid's world, being sort of spooky, being sort of weird, being simplistic in its design, being visually designed in I think a way that makes it accentuate what it was. I sort of wish this would have been released on the big screen just because of all the sky and the lights and everything like that. I think it could have been probably pretty beautiful. And the design, the character design reminds me sort of more of the recent stuff like Ruby Gillman, I think comes to mind in terms of this kind of design. But it's sort of a darker, weirder kids film, sort of reminding me of, I would say, when people bring up the dark kids films that scared them. And this did actually scare my 2-year-old when Dark would suddenly pop out of places. He got really freaked out. He'd just go, he'd freeze. He was very surprised and shocked by that. So I guess I'm supposed to tell you this can get scary for kids. I think honestly what this shows me is that Charlie Kaufman's able, and the story is able to just take all those weirder, odder concepts and make into a broader kind of kids film. That makes it sort of a lot more interesting because as much as we talk about design and animation and all those things, and I think that's very on point with this, although this isn't, to be fair, a DreamWorks. It is a DreamWorks movie, but it's by the studio. All the animation is actually done by Mikros Animation. I don't know. I understand the story and the design was probably done at DreamWorks from what I've heard from people who work there and stuff. I'm not entirely sure of that, but most animation was done by Mikros. If anyone who works at DreamWorks wants to clear up how that production line works, I can't speak on that from any place of authority, but much like Captain Underpants, which I've read in various articles, they compared the process of that to this. It was done by this other studio, and then they handled most of the animation, so it's sort of I guess that's why it went straight to Netflix rather than theaters. I'm assuming. I don't know. This may be why, because Captain Underpants played with animation visually. It's a very rich film, and it seems like Mikros, who also worked on Mutant Mayhem as well, one of the studios, but this was all them. They're visually very smart animation studio, although they work within the style of someone else's. It felt to me a little more visually rich and smarter than just a work for hire job, even though I guess it was that for them. Maybe, I don't know, I can't speak for them either, I'm just assuming. But I think it's a very rich, deeper film than you'd expect, and kind of one that plays and messes with its story throughout, kind of playing with you as an audience while sort of dipping into the traditional kids film while messing with itself as well. This is about a young kid named Orion who is scared of many, many things and is not very popular at school whatsoever. One night after he puts in all his, he's very scared of the dark, and he puts in all his kind of nightlights, and then all his nightlights go out, and then the dark comes out and complains about how he's the worst, about being afraid of him. A lot of people are. This kid is really afraid of him. He goes, why don't you see what I do at night? And he brings him along and sees the dark and the dark kind of crew, which is one was Insomnia, one is Sleep, who's voiced by Natasha Timothy from Given the Shadows. Angel Bassett voices Dreams. There's Weird Noises. There's Silence, which is a mouse that speaks another language. I think I got everybody. Insomnia, Sleep. Anyway, there's this whole crew, and this little boy, Orion, goes along with Night to see what happens in a 24-hour period while Night is going around the world, going through the darkness and what the dark actually brings to the world as it's constantly moving before the light. So another character comes along and overtakes it, or gets rid of it, I guess. And he kind of like discovers about himself as he's sort of like telling you this story, and he learns about himself in those sort of journey ways, I guess. You do learn, and pretty early on, I've seen some reviews say they don't want to spoil it. Some do. I don't think it's a spoiler because so many people have, and I've seen in reviews, and apparently it's in a trailer, I'm not sure, but it's fairly early on that you learn that the story is being told. We see Orion, and then we see Orion, because I kind of recognize, looking at the technology in the background, that Orion's story might take place in like the 90s or something, and then you see Orion as a father telling a story to his daughter, and she's interjecting, and you kind of, some of the logic in the film, because the film plays it like just a regular film, once you realize it's a kid's story that was then adapted by an adult, it sort of makes sense, and that the other kid is sort of messing with the story as well, like his daughter when he's older is messing with the story. It takes on sort of kid logic in certain places, and in a way, this is the most like adaptation I've seen of him in a while. It's kind of a little more subversive in that sense, because it's not often where you're aware of the perspective of the actual storyteller telling you the story, and it messes with the story itself, much like adaptation did. It's not as crazy as adaptation, because this is a big DreamWorks movie. And I will say the one thing I found odd about this Charlie Kaufman film is, since I've seen Charlie Kaufman films that are done by like Spike Jonze and Michel Gondry and Charlie Kaufman himself, usually I come out of those in sort of like a daze, like almost feel like I'm high or something. I didn't feel that way with this, but I don't think it was trying to be as crazy. So that might be a stupid nitpick. I have heard a lot of pushback against the design at the beginning. I thought, and watching it in context of all of it, because this seems to really turn people off. First off, I don't understand the big deal with it, but to me it was like, the reason the design was so normal, and it feels like Ron Goes Wrong, it feels like several different animated films, that the point of that like kind of boring design and stuff was that when you get to the dark and you have the crazier creatures, they feel that much more crazy. It's sort of like a visual idea, basically. If you've ever seen Wizard of Oz, it's all like black and white, like a regular 30s movie, and then they're in Oz, it's all in color and stuff, and it seems crazier. It's just like a visual, visually there was a point to it, basically, is what I'm saying. It's fairly obvious, but I get that. I don't really understand. I guess people have to say it's boring for the sake of it. I didn't expect, I'd seen the trailers, I didn't expect this to be the crazier ones, or Ruby Gillman or something. It felt constrained, and then it would go crazier when you go in the fantastical world. That's like a pretty fundamental storytelling thing, but whatever. Orion and the Dark is a very smart kids film. I don't think it, in some ways, when I think about it and I engage with it, I get really into it, but it doesn't stay with me super a lot. I'm wondering if my kids will want to watch it again. I sort of wanted to watch it again, and I thought about doing it before reviewing it, but I never had the time for anything, so I just didn't get to. But I would like to. It's a really smartly made animated film. I do think its writing, which is why I came to see it, is the best thing about it, and I think it's a great screenplay, and it has a great cast from everything from like Paul Walter Hauser, who's wonderful. He's really great as Dark. Playing, the big, that's like a big role if you're playing like the big eccentric character, whether it be Genie. I hear Genie brought up a lot with this, something like that. You really have to have a real presence, and Paul Walter Hauser is such a great actor. Jacob Tremblay plays the kid, which is like so boring at this point. Like, I have no problem with Jacob Tremblay. It's just like, we can maybe cast other kids than Jacob Tremblay. It just feels like does he just show up when you announce these things? Like, he's fine. I don't have anything against the person. Like, Colin Hanks plays older Orion. You have Angela Bassett playing Dreams, I guess. People like that. Nate Faxon as Insomnia. Ike Berchowitz as Light. And the mom from Spy Kids, Carla Giorgino, she was great as well. It has a wonderful voice cast. It's a really kind of original kind of kids film, and I'm a little sad it's getting forgotten. Like, even when you reviews on YouTube, there's not a ton of those, and there's not a lot of attention. I feel like I'm telling more people about it than Netflix's advertising department, which stinks, because I think everyone's like, can't they make more original kind of kids animated films? And there is one. It's very original, very different, and I don't hear enough about it, unfortunately. I do think this plays into the anxiety and fears of kids, and in a way that doesn't feel like a grown-up pushing them. Like I think you could think Charlie Kaufman's pushing his own style. It feels very sort of like natural when the kid is listing off all his like anxieties, and it feels like in a very kid way. I do think it like introduces a lot of Charlie Kaufman-esque ideas, very much meeting the kids at their level, not sort of like talking down to them or the writing's not overdoing it or something like that. It very much feels natural. Like even the thing with the kids, and you understand the various storytellers in it, it feels like a child talking to their dad telling a story. It feels very natural within that. Or even the plot of this is not too crazy. It's like, oh, goes on, like, isn't the wish dragon that? Isn't this? Like, we've seen so many of these versions of like kid goes off with magical creature. It's so wild and so crazy, all that stuff. I think it's not so, that's not what works about it. There are certain plot points at the end that do like I don't want to get into it, but there is a certain thing, and maybe at some, I don't know, that I didn't particularly like, but for the most part, I was pretty high on this movie. I thought it was pretty great, and I like when Dreamworks works with micro-suit animation. I think they make a good combination. I liked What Happened with Captain Underpants, which I thought was a great movie. I know sometimes people disagree with that, but I don't know. They probably don't know what I'm talking about. But this is a interesting animated film, and I think one that I want to re-examine. Most Charlie Kaufman things I can't really get on in initial viewing. I feel like I need to go through it a few times. I still felt that way, even though it didn't feel like Charlie Kaufman. It feels like Charlie Kaufman meets Dreamworks. But this is sort of like what works about big studios. It's like you have an interesting screenwriter, he works with the team. This is a first-time director, Sean Karamatz, I think. I don't know. I'll have his name down here, but he did it. Thought he did a good job. The direction was really good. I thought it was a really interesting, captivating, imaginative kind of film. I know it's based on a book, Orion in the Dark, written by Emma Yarlett. I think it's like as much as I'm like, this is Charlie Kaufman. This isn't like, I didn't read the book, and I don't want to maybe I'm like putting stuff on him that is already in the book, or maybe the book's radically different or the same, or I don't know. It felt a little different, but I didn't say, and probably I should have since I'm making such a big deal of Charlie Kaufman, but I didn't. So maybe I'll see if I can get them at some point. It'd be interesting to see. But this is a pretty original animated film. I even think of, this past we're just at the beginning of 2024, then 2023 had two pretty original animated films. I'd still put this above, like, most of what, like, even with what we've had from Dreamworks, we have for everything this year. I mean, I give Dreamworks a lot of credit for making a film like this with Charlie Kaufman. I can't see Pixar being this interesting and experimental in certain ways, but it doesn't feel that way. It feels very kind of traditional. It's kind of like a little bit of a trap there, but a trap into good storytelling, I would say. You wake up and you realize like what you've opened up to, and I think that's quite fascinating, actually. Orion in the Dark is probably better than its reputation or its publicity really does for it, but I hope more people check it out. I think it's a far more interesting film, kind of going into your fear of dark and conquering it and understanding who you are through conquering that fear. I think that is an interesting idea through conquering it, and how that tale can be used throughout time to tell future generations how to do it and understand themselves, and maybe you can understand something about yourself in the present while hearing those stories. Because the night is scary, and at a certain point you want to try to get past it, and seeing the embodiment of dark and understanding what that world is makes you kind of realize, much like when you grow up into the real world, how it's maybe not as scary. So if you have seen Orion and the Dark and you would like to talk about it, then comment below in the comments and subscribe if you would like to.